Welcome back to another episode of the Apache podcast. Just going to be updating on the recent visit um, Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to to Moscow on the new either 19 or 20 peace plan. So we're going to be delving into that. Uh,
Putin is digging.
this is a video on the after. Um, I think Putin made this video before he met with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. So I actually got a few things that I wanted to discuss about. But all right, let's watch this video.
In on one of his key demands to end the war on Ukraine. President Putin vowing that Moscow will seize Ukraine's Donbas region by military or other means. It comes as the Ukrainian source tells CNN a delegation from Kyiv is traveling to Miami for a fresh round of peace talks with their American counterparts. That's after a lengthy meeting between Putin and US negotiators in Moscow this week that ended without a compromise. Well, let's get the latest from international.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember, like, so Jared Kushner is the son-in-law of Trump. And then you have Steve Witkoff, who is essentially the just some real estate billionaire who got very successful and then got picked to do this. I've heard that he was okay when it comes to negotiation between Israel and the Palestinians or Hamas. Um, but you're also talking between Israelis versus a militia. You know, I don't know why you would send a economic person or someone who almost have no foreign policy or foreign experience to deal with Russia multiple fronts. Um, I don't know about Jared Kushner. I don't know what he, yeah. But so from what I've heard, no, when Putin was making this video, uh, or not making this video, but when he was doing his little pep talk, um, I think he made Steve and Jared wait for like 3 hours before he even joined them. So that was interesting. I mean, that's definitely a power play on Putin's side. And then of course, this is all after, um, you know, this is all after the whole um, Steve pretty much coaching Ushakov on how to talk to Trump. So
Security correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh is live in Kyiv. So, Nick, how do you read Putin's comments as this Ukrainian delegation prepare to meet with the Americans? And does this set back progress, in essence?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's not just saying he'll either take Donbass through diplomacy or by force. He's saying he'll take Donbass and Novorossiya, which is a term, frankly, we haven't heard for quite some time. Historical, used at the beginning of one of the first or the second invasion in 2014, and referring to a significant swathe of Ukraine that Russia, from sort of Tsarist times, claims is essentially its territory, probably pointing to the remainder of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions that are not occupied by Russia.
so what he is saying is for the Donbass and the other name, I don't know how to pronounce it. So Donbass is essentially two regions, two oblasts. You have the Luhansk and the Donetsk. So this entirety is the Donbass region, and you can see some of this yellow, some of the regained territories, including some areas that are under Ukrainian control. What I mean, of course, during one of the 28-point peace plan was they wanted the entirety of this region, including this region, this area that's not, that's owned by the Ukrainians. or controlled by the Ukrainians. But at the same time, you know, they have, I mean, you can look at this, I believe this dark shaded area is controlled by Russia since 2014. I don't know how much Donetsk and Luhansk region they, or this was, you know, already before 2022 February, but I mean, they had over a decade to fortify this region, um, or I mean, most of the region really. But this is where the Russians are having issues with breakthrough. So, and then when what was saying that Putin wanted two regions by force or by diplomacy means was all of Donbass and potentially Zaporizhia and Kherson region. So they're all southern.
Russia. So essentially, Putin perhaps returning to his most maximalist territorial ambitions for Ukraine. Is this part of a negotiating strategy? Did he actually receive the proposal from Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, in the Kremlin on Tuesday more welcomingly, with perhaps greater recognition for concessions? We don't know. We do know that Ukraine's top negotiator is in Miami today, going to be getting a proper debrief from both Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and his envoy Witkoff, presumably going through the more detailed elements of the Kremlin response, if indeed there was detail to that response. It may simply have been that Putin took whatever concessions were being presented to him after these lengthy US-Ukraine talks, trying to get something together, and said, no, I want more. But there has been a significant flurry of activity by the Europeans, by the Ukrainians, most of it, I'm sure, an element of debriefing to try and be sure everyone's aware of exactly what the results of those meetings were, but also probably to a bid to show there is.
I'm trying to think of the timeline. I think the timeline is so of course about 2 weeks ago, um, Steve Witkoff had a meeting with some of the Russian representative regarding about a leaked 28-point peace plan that I broke down a little, I believe last week or sometime this week. And, you know, everybody's saying it's the Russians' wish list. I mean, I think that's just, you know, that's exactly, that's, in my opinion, that's the, you know, full surrender of Ukraine. Um, but, and, um, and of course, before Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Putin, they met, I believe they met the Ukrainian delegation as well. And then right after the Putin meeting, they met, I believe the day after, with the Ukrainian delegation again to discuss, you know, what, you know, how did the talks go in Kremlin? So.
Continued diplomatic activity to find some kind of compromise. But it's really been Russia who've offered the most detailed assessment of that meeting, talking about a 27, 28-point plan, 4 other separate documents, and essentially saying no compromise was reached and they saw no immediate need for Trump and Putin to meet. Remember, Trump has said, I'm not really going to get involved in this until the deal is done. He also yesterday talks about how he thought that the meeting had gone well, and indeed that the US-Ukraine relationship or their proposal had gone well. It does appear at this point that the Kremlin have dug their heels in about what territory they want. We still don't publicly know whether a concession or a land swap was part of what Witkoff brought with him. We've heard very little from Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, in terms of the detail of what was offered or the detail of what he's willing to go along with. That is clearly by design. He had a press conference today that turned into statements only, essentially, in which negotiations were not mentioned alongside his Cypriot counterpart. So a lot not being said, a lot of activity being projected by Ukraine and its allies, and I'm sure some details too to be imparted in Miami in these forthcoming talks. Where does it go? I think the fear is that the Ukrainians with the European allies want to certainly maintain this sense that work is being done, that there is compromise to be reached, that there is activity they can engage in to prevent the likely next phase of this. We've been through this process so many times.
I think, I don't know. I think that, you know, we're going back to it's 2 step forward, 1 step back, or 2 step back, 1 step forward. We're just going in circles at this point. I mean, Trump has some kind of bipolar when it comes to, one week he supports the Russians, the other week he supports the Ukrainians. So he can't really make up his own mind in this regards. Um, but at the same time, um, what really boggles my mind is like the American narrative who who says that this is a European problem. This is a Europe's war. But at the same time, the Trump administration makes no effort in letting the Europeans even have a voice. I believe that several discussions um, are high level discussions are directly involved with the U.S. delegation and the Russian delegation, and the Europeans are nowhere to be seen. But of course, Zelensky is making his way to Ireland and some other European countries. But I think that as much as I know that the Europeans can't really do much, I think that, Zelensky's just going around his field trip around Europe is pretty pointless. He's just getting standing ovations and applauses everywhere he goes. It's good and dandy for him, but he's not getting, and he's getting all of these countries' support, but at the same time, without the United States, systematically bring in the Europeans, EU and NATO's alike countries to kind of rally behind, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm even willing to say that, maybe the Russians' objective in all of this is, of course, territory, parts of Ukraine territorial gain, but also, I mean, the United States, have tried so hard to redirect Russia away from China, and somehow it it kind of, I don't know if it got backfired, but it almost looked like the Russians are doing the same thing to pull the United States away from Europeans, kind of circle. Um, I mean, and it's working. Whatever the Russians is doing, it's working because right now, there are European countries and European leaders who view the Trump administrations as enemies. I mean, you have talking points like, um, what's going on with Israel. You have issues with potential annexation with Greenland. Um, yeah, so there's just a whole lot of nonsense, and we're not getting anywhere. Um, yeah, continue.
For, and that's White House frustration that often ends in pressure on the negotiating parties. In the past, we've seen Trump realize it's easier to pressure Ukraine and do that rather than pressure the Russians. And I think that's what many in Kiev are fearing here. They need to keep this feeling like it's moving forwards or risk potentially another bout of threats potentially from President Trump.
Nick, thank you. Let's turn to New Delhi, where Russian President Putin arrived a short time ago for a two-day state visit. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is hosting a private dinner for his guests tonight ahead of their summit on Friday. It's Putin's first trip to India since the start of the Ukraine war and comes as Modi tries to steer a diplomatic course that balances India's relationships with both Russia and the US. For days now, Russian and Indian flags have been flying in the Indian capital, with posters of Putin gracing public places and government buildings. Well, joining us
I mean,
from
this
New Delhi.
this is a major deal with Russians visiting India, but I think that um, because all of this kind of came, was it a few months ago, a few months ago, where Trump finally um, decided to put sanctions on India uh, regarding Russian oil, and I think that the relationship between like Russia and India, I don't know if it's gotten worse. I mean, it's definitely gotten better because before the war, I believe the last time I read the numbers were 2.5 to 5% of oil from Russia, and now they're up to like 30, 35, 40% import of oil from Russia. So, I mean, of course, the amount of sanctions that Russia has been hit on is pretty hefty. But yeah, I mean, this is this is one way Putin's is pretty much gathering his or showing to the world that he's not alone. As much as the West think that Russia is isolated. I mean, he's got India, he's got China behind his back, and several other Middle Eastern, Asian countries behind him as well. And Russia itself is a part of the BRICS country, the BRICS alliance. I don't know if you call it alliance, but economic partnership at least with with India, Brazil, South Africa, and I forgot the last one. But I mean, the BRICS, five country of BRICS is bigger than the G7. Uh, so GDP speaking, so that's saying something. Um, yeah, I mean, I just think that that India will continue to buy Russian oil and other Russian resources, at a major discount. So.
Senior international correspondent Will Ripley. So, Will, high on the agenda for Putin's visit.
And yeah, that just goes to say that the sanctions doesn't do anything. Yeah.
Are more defense deals with Moscow. The question, though, is how much support is Putin likely to get?
Well, it seems as if things are off to a good start. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was at the airport. He greeted Putin as he walked off his plane. Then the two jumped into a limo together and they sat and talked as they drove to that private dinner. It's a similar scene that we saw play out in China after the SCO summit a few months ago, where they actually stayed in the park limousine and talked for nearly an hour. So the two have a warm relationship that has been on display publicly repeatedly in recent months. See them, holding hands, smiling, joking. They did the same thing together with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. And so we already know that a number of deals are basically already negotiated, and the two are going to be signing them here in Delhi tomorrow. Deals.
And that's right. I forgot about that. About a month ago, all three of them, so Putin, Modi, and the Chinese president Xi Jinping, they all met together, and they were having a great time. I mean, they were hugging, laughing. So yeah, I don't even know if it's the West collective agenda to pull Russia away from China. I do know that it's the United States goal is to kind of wedge in there between China and Russia. And I mean, I don't know if it might even made their bond and partnership stronger. So.
On energy, deals on fighter jet sales, and potentially even technology sharing, with Russia offering to help India domestically produce the Russian fighter jets that are the backbone of their air force.
India is, I believe, it is the fastest growing economy of the world at this point. So.
There's also on Prime Minister Modi's agenda an effort to try to rebalance trade between the two countries. Right now, India is buying a lot more from Russia, especially when it comes to the cheap oil that's been on sale ever since the Ukraine war began. Russia's not buying a whole lot from India. Prime Minister Modi is under political pressure here to change that. So there's a lot that they can do. And of course, they know the optics are important, and somebody in the White House specifically.
You see that guy? That dude.
To change that.
Yeah, it's so serious.
Russia's not buying a whole lot from India. Prime Minister Modi is under political pressure
to
change that.
Oh.
So there's a lot that they can do, and of course they know the optics are important.
Look at that.
And
just
somebody in the
so
White
stern.
House, specifically President Donald Trump, is going to be watching very closely after that.
He doesn't
summit
look Indian
in China,
to me, does he?
Got in the limo and talked together. President Trump, I think it was on Truth Social or somewhere, basically said he thinks that the U.S. lost India to Russia. So obviously, he loves to be in the room with these guys as well. He he likes to be part of the conversation. And the fact that he's sitting on the outside watching the two of them projecting confidence, projecting the fact that they have leverage and they have other options besides the United States, that's got to be getting under his skin just a little bit, even though both Modi and Putin have a lot that they need to sort out with President Trump. Modi would like to get a trade deal secured with the United States. He'd like to dial down some of the tensions that have been rising in recent months, particularly over the purchases of Russian oil. And of course, we know that Russia, as Nick was just saying, they're talking with the United States about ways to end the war in Ukraine. But
I am curious to what the trade deal is between the United States and Russia. Or not United States and Russia, United States and India.
Democracy, certainly bolstering his case that he doesn't really have to give up much. He can keep on fighting until he gets what he wants.
Will Ripley in New Delhi, thank you. Well, we're joined now by military analyst Frans Stefan Goddy. Frans, it's great to have you. I'm sure you're in there.
200 billion in 2024.
I just want to start with this latest line from President Putin vowing that Moscow will seize Ukraine's Donbas region by military or other means. I mean, when we consider the talks that have just happened this week, it was somewhat predictable, was it not, that Putin was always unlikely to accept any deal when the odds right now are currently stacked in his favor, both on the front lines and diplomatically?
Yes, you're absolutely correct on this matter. Vladimir Putin, Russia, thinks that it still has military options and that it currently is winning on the battlefield in Ukraine. Russia is taking significant casualties, but it is slowly advancing and attriting Ukrainian forces. So it was always unlikely that Russia would accept a temporary ceasefire or even commence serious peace negotiations, just because it is still in the process of creating military facts on the ground.
I mean, we are in effect back to square one potentially, but with options now more exhausted for Ukraine than in previous rounds of peace negotiations. You've said that Ukraine now face a terrible catch-22, which is to agree to concede the Donbass in exchange for a fragile peace, or fight until Russia forced to and take it from them. But are Russia's chances of that so certain, given they have failed to achieve taking the Donbass and other land after 4 years of intensive warfare now?
I mean, this is important because it matters when it comes to because I believe just the week before Thanksgiving, Trump kind of sort of not really made a ultimatum to Zelensky, whether he agrees to sign the 28 point peace plan, or Ukraine will lose a key partner, the United States. The United States will stop military support, will stop intelligence sharing, and whatnot. But at the same time, here comes another situation. Of course, I don't know what the United States are going to do with the recent meetings between the Kremlins and the Ukrainian delegation. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Trump is going to come out with another ultimatum, by Christmas. But I don't know. I feel like the timelines are a joke, if anything. I mean, it was only recently, after 6 months of warnings and timelines, that the Trump administration finally put sanctions on the Russian oil companies. So,
well, war is always highly contingent. Of course, it's unclear whether Russia can accomplish those objectives over the next couple of months, over the next couple of years. However, having said that, it is...
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at the last 18 to 24 months, the last 2 years or so, I mean, the Russians have gained very minimal advancements in territories, and heavy casualty. I mean, of course, the Ukrainian casualties are up there as well, but you have numbers throwing around of upwards of 1 million I believe in even mid 2024 or early 2024, that was the number of figures. And of course, the Trump team really likes to push, the amount of people that's dying on the Russian side, and the Ukrainian side. But I mean, I think what the United States and and our government don't understand is that the Putin doesn't care. The Russians doesn't care how many bodies they're going to throw at it, because at the end of the day, the Russians still has more bodies to throw at than Ukraine in a 3-to-1 ratio. The Russians have about 150, 140, 150 million ish or so, and then the Ukrainians have about 40 to 50 million. Of course, that number changed a lot with mass exodus and people fleeing the country. So, but yeah, I mean, the amount of territories that the Russians have gained are very, very insignificant. And of course, they've even reached out to foreign countries, uh, to participate in the Russian warfare. Uh, you know, you have people like South Korea, South Asia, places like that.
Clear that the war overall is not going well for Ukraine, that it is trending slightly negatively for Ukraine, and that Russia currently is making advances in the Donbass. So it's probably likely that Russia is going to gain additional territory in the Donbass over the next couple of months than not. So I think time is actually on Russia's side in this matter. The West, Trump, NATO, other supporters.
Don't get me wrong. Because everybody thinks that Ukraine's gonna win this, or Ukraine's gonna do that. Ukraine's gonna do that. Ukraine's not gonna do anything without United States approval. That's Europe is not gonna do anything for Ukraine without United States approval. And as sad as that is, it's yeah, that's how politics works. Even when the United States is saying that this is Europeans' war, yet completely leaving Europeans in all discussions, you know low delegations and at the highest level. Um, and of course, you have Europeans who are running in circles trying to appease Trump in their favor, and it's getting nowhere. Um,
Of Ukraine may have clocks, but Vladimir Putin and Russia certainly have time to just wait out the West.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I clicked that. There's another video. Um, which one was it? It was this
NATO
one.
foreign ministers just wrapped.
There was a, and I think that this whole point is really kind of comes down to is when is Trump gonna make an ultimatum again for Ukraine? And what is Europeans' role in all of this? Because because the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, came out saying that Ukraine is on a irreversible path to NATO membership. And of course, United States and Russia is saying that they will never support that idea. Um, that's the Russian talking points. Um, but at the same time, you know, you have Zelensky's going around trying to rally all the support he can from Europeans, and it's getting nowhere. So here's another, this is pretty much right at, so this video is gonna say something on right after, I don't think it's after, it was before, I believe it was before the meeting between Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Putin is, in his military uniform, his military scrubs, came out and pretty much just said, um, we don't, they don't want war with Europe, but but they're ready for a war with Europe. So I don't really understand where Europeans kind of, yeah, I don't know where the disconnect is. I don't know, I don't know where, where that came from, but
Wrapped up a critically important meeting in Brussels with the war in Ukraine clearly topping their agenda. NATO Secretary General reiterating the alliance's support for the war-torn country.
Ukraine continues to show incredible resilience. Putin believes he can outlast us, but we are not going anywhere. Today is yet another clear sign that he is wrong. We are strengthening our support for Ukraine and increasing pressure on Russia.
Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, that comes one.
so here we have, I believe she might be the translator or something. So Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Ushakov, economic dude, and then Putin. I don't know who the middle guy is, but I mean, most of them speak English quite well. So
Day after
or
marathon
not, yeah,
talks
English.
in Moscow between Russia's Vladimir Putin and President Trump's negotiators, the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Those negotiations produced no breakthrough on a plan to end the war in Ukraine. Joining us now to discuss what's going on, the former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us. Patience clearly is growing thin among European foreign ministers, NATO leaders who say Vladimir Putin is not necessarily even interested in peace right now. Should NATO be at the table for these U.S.-led peace talks, and should Ukraine eventually be able to join NATO?
Well, I'm not sure the peace talks are going to go anywhere, so I wouldn't really press for whether NATO's involved or not, although there should be very close coordination between the United States and our European allies. But what really needs to happen is more pressure on Putin, as Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, just said. Going and having talks when Putin has made clear that he wants to subjugate Ukraine completely to Russia is just not going to go anywhere. Putin has to feel the pressure. So that's going to be secondary sanctions on oil and gas trading. It's
That's
going to be
the
long-range weapons that can hit deeper
European
inside
Union
Russia to take out the
representative,
military
Callas,
facilities
something,
that
something.
Russia's using to hit Ukraine, oil
Oh, one
refineries
of
that
them.
Ukraine is doing on its own. Putin really has to feel the heat financially, economically, and militarily if we're going to get to a point where he has a ceasefire.
The Kremlin says Putin has accepted at least some U.S. proposals on Ukraine and says Russia is ready to keep on talking.
Uh, that's funny because I think the reason why the Kremlin is saying they agreed to some, these, mind you, these guys are very, very smart. When it comes to like understanding how Trump works, they're essentially just speaking Trump's language.
Are these negotiations, you believe, going anywhere?
Not at all. If you remember how we got here, this was Russia producing its own proposals and giving them to Steve Witkoff, who turns around and puts out this 28-point plan, which was horrendous. It was just the Russian position. And then that was modified in negotiations between Marco Rubio, the Ukrainians, and European allies to produce a more reasonable plan. The Ukrainians said this is passable. And then the Russians reject that. There are probably a few points that made it into both plans, but they're just the original Russian points that the Russians are saying are okay. Meanwhile, they are not willing to stop the fighting. They're not going to have a ceasefire until they get everything that they want. They're demanding Ukraine withdraw from Ukrainian territory. It's really an incredibly maximalist position.
The NATO Secretary General, as you heard, Mark Rutte, offered his full-throated support for President Trump's peace efforts, saying President Trump is, and I'm quoting him now, the only person in the whole world who can break this deadlock. Should Europe be taking a more active role in the process, Ambassador? And what about other parties, for example, even China?
Yeah, I do think Europe could be doing more. They have agreed already to spend.
It's not that Europe can do more. I mean, Europe wants to do more, but Europe can't do anything without Trump, without the United States letting them in. No matter what no matter, whether it's sanctions, whether it's coalition of the willing, they're not going to do anything without. Not saying that the United States needs to sign off on it, is that they even need to be at the negotiation table to even begin, to understand the European side of things. In time after time, the several meetings, the Europeans aren't even there. We have the Alaska, the last week, the 28-point peace plan, the new 19 peace plan, the delegation with visiting to Kremlin with the recent one. None of the recent negotiations and discussions even remotely involved any of the Europeans. So
spend a lot more on defense. They are now coordinating delivery of American arms and ammunition through NATO mechanisms. Those are good steps. More that can be done. We could be integrating Ukraine's air defenses with NATO's own air defenses so we can be helping them more with air defense. NATO could have its own extended air defense zone going further toward Ukraine or covering part of Ukrainian territory to protect NATO populations who have been exposed to drone and missile encroachments from Russia. They could be providing the frozen assets. They could be seizing those assets, the Russian central bank assets, using that to provide you.
Yeah, so this one is the interesting one because I believe the European delegation, or not European delegation, but a lot of the collective of Europeans wants to use the frozen Russian assets. I believe like it was 250 to 300 billion, and a third of that is owned and managed by Brussels, Belgium. And Belgium is, afraid of the retaliation, the legal ramification of allowing this. And of course, there's already been several European discussions on how to essentially share the risk of Belgium. So, when Russia turns around and say, uh, goes after Belgium, Belgium is not there to fend off by itself, but Europeans are there to kind of hold their hands, hold Belgium's hand through this. But yeah, I don't know, because right now I believe that the figures are Ukrainians are supposedly running out of their piggy bank funds around April 2026, and the Europeans, the president of European Union is trying really hard to push the frozen assets package, like 104 billion or something for the figures for 2026. So
Ukraine money for ammunition, arms, and financial support. So there's a lot that Europe could still be doing more of itself to make itself more relevant and be part of any kind of diplomatic discussions.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said today the head of the Ukrainian delegation is preparing to meet President Trump's representatives here in the United States. Where do you see this headed?
Well, I think that for the Ukrainians, they sent a delegation to Florida before the trip to Moscow. They want to get a detailed readout after the trip to Moscow. Ukraine has aligned itself with the United States very deliberately. They're willing to have a ceasefire in place, even though it means recognizing or accepting that Russia occupies 20% of Ukrainian territory. They have worked out this minerals deal. So there's a joint U.S.-Ukrainian investment fund. So we have shared economic interests going forward. So Ukraine is assiduously linking itself to the US and Europe because it wants to be, and it will be, a sovereign, independent European democracy and part of Euro-Atlantic institutions. That's where this heads. But getting there requires getting Putin to stop the fighting.
Ambassador Kurt Volker, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Wolf. Thank you.
More comments today from the Kremlin over those talks that didn't produce a breakthrough in the war in Ukraine. An aide to Vladimir Putin says Tuesday's meeting in Moscow between Russia's president and Donald Trump's top two negotiators was useful and that talks will continue. Well, a big sticking point for Russia is Ukraine's potential membership in NATO, and NATO foreign ministers have been meeting.
Let's go back. I wanted to say something. So the Kremlin, Russia is ready to keep talking to forge Ukraine deal. So here's my take in all of this is that Putin is a KGB officer, and everybody on the U.S. side is economic individuals, Trump included. I mean, Trump. I guess Trump himself has has his own first term presidency to kind of understand the Russian side, but the Russians are really good at timing certain things and certain activities, and I believe multiple fronts now. Just before Zelensky is set to meet, Trump, you have you pretty much have the day before, the hour before, Putin makes a phone call to Trump, kind of, I don't know if I would call it sabotage, but derail the the next day discussion, derail the discussion between Zelensky and Trump for the next day, and that has happened several times. But I think that the reason why this statement was made, they're just buying time. They're just buying time because eventually Ukrainians are just going to run out of funds, and Russia is, I'd say Russia is stronger than ever. I mean, maybe not economically because I know their economic is it's taking a huge toll with the sanctions and keeping up with his war machines. But I mean, they got alliances, they got money to burn, they got bodies to throw at all these problems. So I don't think it's going to be an issue for the Russians to continue. And the Russians are just hoping that eventually the Ukrainians are gonna slowly run out. So.
For Russia is Ukraine's potential membership in NATO, and NATO foreign ministers have been meeting today in Brussels to discuss Ukraine. This comes after a senior NATO official recently said there's no indication that Moscow is willing to make meaningful concessions to end this war. Well, for its part, the EU is trying to put a dent in Russia's war chest by phasing out Russian natural gas imports by late 2027. I want to head to Washington to CNN's Kylie Atwood on this.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big deal. I don't know why they haven't. I don't know why it takes, it takes up to this point for the Europeans to realize they need to, their dependency, not only dependency, but they shouldn't be, pooling all of their money towards buying cheap Russian oil. But now you have certain other, specifically NATO countries like Slovakia and Hungary still buys Russian, and even Trump gave Hungary a 1 year bypass to the Russian sanctions. So yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
Noting that Secretary Rubio was not there for these talks, just how much real progress, as you understand it, has been made at this point?
Well, the readout that we got from Russian officials certainly does not give the indication that the two parties walked away on the verge of a possible agreement, Becky. We heard from the Kremlin taking questions after this meeting yesterday, saying that President Putin did agree with the U.S. officials, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, on a number of issues, but that he also did not hide his negative views on a number of the proposals, indicating that there is still some significant hesitation on behalf of Russia to move forward with what the U.S. was putting on.
Okay, let's think of some of the things that that the Russians could have agreed to, because let's pull up, pull up a the 28 piece plan in, because I don't know if I have the I don't know if I have um the 19 or 20 piece plan. Let me see. I don't think
On
I
the
can
table, which they had discussed.
open up another tab. 28, 28 point. See if this one has it. No. No. Trying to find. Maybe this one has it. Okay. Yeah. So let's go through this really quick. Yeah, this is why I hate using these news channels, because these ads are just mind-boggling. Okay. So so she essentially is saying, the Russians agreed on some and disagreed on some. So this isn't a way that's saying that, oh, we're getting closer to we're getting closer to finding a peace deal between all of this. Because if you look at some of these points, of course Russia's going to agree on. Um, because there's some stupid ones, like Russia will be integrated into the global economy. Who would have thought? Of course they're gonna, of course they want that. Derp derp. Russia will be invited to rejoin the G8. That's a pretty good thing. Yeah, if I were Russian, I like that. Um, Frozen funds would be used as follows. There is the remainder of the frozen Russian funds, so about a third of it will be invested in separate U.S.-Russian investment. If I was Russian, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Yeah, I mean, of course, this is 28. I don't know I don't know the revised 18 or 18, 19, 20 20 plan. Here's another one. Ukraine will hold election in 100 days. Yeah, if I don't know why that's a big deal for the Russians. I don't know why the United States is pushing this. Maybe the Russian election is an example for everybody to follow. Who knows? Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's when they say they agreed on some, this is what they're talking about, agreed on some.
With the Ukrainians. Now, we did hear from President Trump yesterday during a meeting with his cabinet at the White House while his officials were over in Russia meeting with President Putin. Listen to what President Trump said about that ongoing meeting.
Our people are over in Russia right now to see if we can get it settled. Not an easy situation. Let me tell you what a mess. It's a war that never would have happened if I were president. Not even
What
a
a
chance.
lame
And it
talking
didn't
point.
happen for 4 years.
I mean, he's gonna drive this until the wheels off. It's irrelevant at this point. Sure, he essentially, to quote his words, inherited this um from the Biden presidency. But I mean, this technically started all the way back in Obama. But and I believe during his first term, he said that he sent javelins and Obama, sent bed sheets and whatnot. So I don't know. I think all of these talking points are pointless. But at the end of the day, I believe Trump has a I don't know if I blame himself, but more of his cabinets, the people that are whispering in his ear. Yeah.
Now, one of the other things that the Kremlin said is, interestingly, that there are now 4 documents, not just one document, that the two parties are going to be discussing. We don't know the details of what is in those 4 documents that are now standing. We do know that there are no plans for further follow-up meetings in person between President Putin and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. They said that they would follow up by phone. And of course, we're watching to see what U.S. officials say today about this after they briefed the White House. Going into these meetings, we should note that Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Sunday, after meeting with the Ukrainians, that this was incredibly complicated. He cast this as being something that still had some work to be done. Even though the U.S. is talking in person with both sides, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to get both sides to close that gap of where those disagreements still stand. Becky?
Good to have you. Thank you.
I don't know why my ad blocker is not working properly.
Well, Donald
But
Trump's
yeah, that's kind of all I got for today. Yeah, like, subscribe, follow, all the YouTube stuff. Cool. See you all on the next, maybe tomorrow or maybe the next day. Kind of take it day by day with the holiday season. So